Majo John Ned and Parque Acamal, the center square of the little pueblo of Acamal. Sometimes on Saturdays they set up this clothing exchange down here. I'm needing clothing, and last time I had no money, but today I do. They need cash, and I especially have a hard time getting cash, but I have some today. And I watch kids in the park a lot. I bet that dad is taking care of the kids while the mom shops. And the interesting thing about that family, he's teaching his kids to be bilingual. They're obviously Mexican, and the kids naturally go into Spanish, but he's talking to them in English. I don't encounter that a lot, but he's giving them a leg up, which is awesome. This morning I was watching a little one here whose mom was just very patiently following her around from one spot to the next as this little one, maybe 3, ran from this spot to that spot to over there to back to this spot. Give her a year or two, and in the U.S. she's going to get diagnosed as attention deficit. And if my bitterness shows, it's well earned. I was trained as a PhD clinical psychologist right alongside psychiatry residents at the University Teaching Hospital, and I saw the way they were trained. And our training was lacking. And back in the 60s, they didn't teach us anything about addiction. They didn't teach us anything about trauma. No. But psychiatrists have never gotten on the ball around trauma. They sure didn't do a good job with me. I was in the middle of a ton of trauma. And the psychiatrist who 30 years later finally agreed with me that I never should have been a psychiatry victim, survivor, said to me, gee, with all that was going on for you, we never would give a psychiatric diagnosis these days to someone whose life is in chaos. You just can't tell. I think she was speaking for herself and maybe her little psychiatric practice in Asheville, North Carolina, because I think it goes on all the time. Psychiatrists have one hammer, which is biochemistry. They see the whole world that way, and everything looks like a nail to them. They think it's a biochemical. They thought I had a biochemical disorder, and for 30 years gave me wretched drugs that never helped, essentially, barely at all. So how many kids are on Ritalin and other things in the U.S. because they go from one thing to another? I'd call that excited. I'd call that interested in lots of things. And they maybe need some coaching about how to fit into human systems. But they do it a lot easier in Mexico, where kids spend a lot less time at their desks, a lot more time making loud noises, a lot more time running around, and the shorter day. They get out by 1. It's a plague. I consider psychiatry perhaps one of the most oppressive forces in the U.S. And they're in cahoots with Big Pharma, absolutely, and the insurance companies. So, yeah. The doctors finally got knocked off their pedestal over the whole opioid thing. So there's less trust in doctors these days, for good reason. I tell elsewhere the story about my very fine urologist who, after years of watchful waiting with my prostate cancer, finally said, we have to do surgery now. Surgery or radiation, take your pick, but you got to do one or the other. And I thought and reflected and talked with a doctor friend and said, no, I'm not concerned about it. I'm pretty sure I'm actually in no danger.